Welcome to Scunthorpe. This industrial town is home to just over 80,000 people, but it might be the scene of the UK's next political battle. In May, the residents of Greater Lincolnshire will elect their first ever mayor, and Reform UK are eyeing it up as another potential gain. So our chief political commentator Kitty Donaldson travelled to Scunthorpe to find out how residents feel about the town and why Reform are quite so optimistic. Scunthorpe rose from a population of around 1,000 in the 1840s to 50,000 in the 1950s. Most of this buoyed by the emergence of the steel industry in the area. The steel factory still dominates the skyline in the southeast of the town. It once employed nearly 100,000 people. Now it employs 3,000. And that is part of a process which leaves many of the people living here feeling like their town is empty.
I was born here. I'm nearly 57, and really now it feels more like a ghost town than what it was. There's not a lot going on. The shops closing down left, right and centre. And to be honest with you, it's my hometown, but sometimes I feel a bit embarrassed by it, if I'm being honest. You know, it's a bit of a letdown now.
And how long have you lived in the area?
Oh, since 1962.
Yeah. And have you seen many changes in that time?
Oh, yes. Yeah. All for the worse.
Really?
Well, all the shops are shut in. So it's even worse since COVID, it seems to be, you know, because everybody orders online, don't they? Or, you know what I mean? So the shops shutting every week. You've only to look around, you'll see.
I've just recently become the manager of a HAVA, which is for the homeless and the addicted.
And do you think it's a particularly big problem in this area?
It is a lot worse than I thought it was, yeah. I'm originally from Rotherham and it's not that bad, but in Scunthorpe you get at least 15, 20 homeless people coming in during the day just to see if they've got spare pants, things like that, because it's absolutely freezing at the minute.
And do you find the local community supportive, or is it more of a divided community?
It's a divided community.
And I said shops closing left, right and centre, rents have gone up, people can't afford it, and then they're just getting replaced by charity shops, things like that.
But there is also another tension within the area. It was described by one resident as being a barcode town, where white and British Asian communities do not integrate with each other.
I think the town's lost its identity in a lot of ways. There's a lot of foreigners here, which doesn't really bother me, but it seems to have lost a bit of its gumption, a bit of its zest.
There's a lot of foreigners in the town, yeah.
And is that a problem?
Not to me, but no, it might be to somebody, but it's not to me, no. They all live in one place, put it that way.
Okay.
And I won't go down there at night.
And why is that? Because it's rough?
Yeah.
And does that worry people in the town, do you think?
I would think so, yeah.
The other thing we're looking at is the election in May for the mayor of Greater Lincolnshire.
Right.
And just wondering whether you'd had any thoughts about that yet, and how you might vote.
Can I be totally honest with you?
Yeah.
I cannot stand politics and I've got no interest in it. And I wouldn't know one politician from another. The only thing I do know is that generally it's one side conning the other side to get in, and when they get in they make a mess. And that's the only thing that I can say about I've got no interest, honestly. It means nothing to me.
I don't think many people, I'm going to be honest, I don't think many people in Scunthorpe do actually vote. I think it's a case of once the new politicians come into act, we then find out if anything's actually going to change in the community.
And so will you be voting in May?
Probably.
And have you thought about who you might vote for?
I've thought about it and I still don't know.
Given this tension over immigration and the clear dissatisfaction with politics, it is possible that Reform's rhetoric could give them an edge over other candidates. At the last general election, Lincolnshire remained largely in Tory hands. Indeed, a Tory council has run Scunthorpe for over a decade. But in July, Reform UK made their breakthrough in the area, with Richard Tice winning the nearby Boston and Skegness. For Reform, the hopeful candidate is Dame Andrea Jenkins, the former Tory MP and minister. She defected from the Tory party after losing her seat in July. We met her at Scunthorpe's British Steel factory to question her approach on this campaign.
It's an important election not only for Reform, but it's important, I think, for Lincolnshire as well, because I want to bring a common sense approach to politics. I think people are so disengaged, are so frustrated with politicians that don't believe what they say anymore, and I want to restore trust. But I also want to think outside the box.
So Reform are doing very well in the polls nationally, but largely on issues of national importance such as migration.
Yes.
Is that a point you'll be making in the local campaign, or are you going to stick to local issues?
No, I mean, look, it is very important, and And they see it in the heart of Lincolnshire, don't they? We've seen it in Boston as well.
Yeah.
When I used to be a councillor in Boston, we saw the negative effects of, legal migration, etc. Now, so I'll touch on it, but no, a key focus for me is actually, I'd like a Lincolnshire equivalent of an industrial revolution. I want to see hope and really invoke that spirit of Lincolnshire and make sure that I want us to be a beacon of hope in times which are quite difficult for people in this country.
Do you think the Conservatives and Reform risk splitting each other's vote in the elections?
I mean, look, I'm a product of that in the general election. I lost my seat, didn't I, as a Conservative. However, what I've found since, it's quite remarkable actually, since I've been in Reform and campaigning across Lincolnshire and in Grimsby, for example, and in Scunthorpe, etc., Labour voters coming over to Reform. So I think it's different this time. I think what's different is there's actually a party out there, a bit like Thatcher did really. She pulled from both sides, didn't she? I think we've got that ability as Reform to bring common sense policies which attract from Labour and Conservatives.
Using Thatcher as quoting her is fascinating, because I think, or every modern Tory leader rather, would rather hold on to Thatcher themselves. I mean, even the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, was using Thatcher during the election. Yeah. Do you think she's sort of symbolic of something that's been lost, perhaps?
I think you've hit the nail on the head, actually, because I think Thatcher was a kind of leader that we need in Britain at the moment, and I feel we are getting that in the US with Trump. I think what we'll see with Trump in the West is a move from this globalist agenda, like we've seen, the Paris Climate Change Agreement pulling out of. So I think we'll see a move away from that and more of a focus on the nation state and putting your interests of your people at the heart of your decisions. And I think that the British people will see what's going on in America under Trump as time goes on, and I think they'll start wanting that in Britain as well.
But it's not expected to be an easy ride for the Reform candidate. Although candidates from other parties, including Labour, are running, her biggest opponent in the area is expected to be Tory Rob Waltham, who has run North Lincolnshire Council since 2011. He argues that Reform could struggle to fit a national agenda into a local election.
We're running a local election campaign, really, and with a local candidate that's me, and so we'll be fighting the election not on national issues, because it's not a national election. We're talking about how do you improve buses locally, how do you make sure the roads are better, how do you make sure we access better skills, how do we make sure we've got good flood defences, all of those things. How do we stop the pylons, because we've got pylons that are going to be blighting a historic landscape.
Do you think that however much you're talking about pylons and local services, Reform will try and skew the argument towards their key policy areas such as migration?
Well, I have to say, other than national issues, I'm not sure what they stand for. Fighting on a local platform is always, it's more responsive to what residents want to happen. We're not going to rewrite a general election. So by splitting the vote, you've effectively ended up with a big seat Labour majority that means that they can dominate areas like Lincolnshire without having really many members of Parliament there. But most importantly, that split vote does that. It rewards Labour with a message that they can continue to do what they're doing now.
Wouldn't it be just as effective for Reform to say that you would be splitting their vote?
Well, I think, what we do know is in areas where we ended up with a new Labour Member of Parliament, the vote was split between Reform and Conservative. Invariably, Conservative came second. So I would argue that the Reform was splitting the Conservative vote, leading to a Labour MP.
But of course, Greater Lincolnshire is more than just Scunthorpe. Much of it is populated with farmers who could ultimately play a pivotal role in deciding the election.
The farmers are up in arms at the moment. Do you share the sentiment about the inheritance tax changes?
I do share. I think that the Labour government, for which I voted, have completely misunderstood the small farm situation and how a farm is set up. The limit that they can understand inheritance tax in a funny sort of way, but the inheritance tax being based on just £1 million, although it sounds a huge amount of money to everyone else, it is not. So there are an awful lot of farms, not just in Lincolnshire but in the whole country, who are really going to suffer if the farmer, like my husband, drop dead tomorrow, and they're going to be unreasonably penalised and have to sell some of their farm, which might have been in the farm, like in our case, for nearly 100 years. and our morale is so low now. We just feel like we've been bashed over the head with NI and the increase in the minimum wage. We just feel like we've been bashed over the head, and rates are going back up again as well. So we just feel it's so yes, we are not in love with Labour at the moment, and they've got to change their ways or we'll be voting for something else next time.
Talking of voting, elections in May for the Greater Lincolnshire area for the mayoralty. Have you thought yet about who you might vote for?
No, so this is the first time that we've obviously had a mayor in Greater Lincolnshire. Greater Lincolnshire is quite a hard area to look after for one mayor because it is 100 miles from top to bottom, so that's a big area. And as you say, you've got the rural, you've got the lovely Lincoln, which is beautiful, you've got Scunthorpe, which is very industrial, and you've got everything in between. You've got the huge coastal area as well, so it is going to be very tricky for them. I think we've just got to see what policies they're going to come out with.
You'll be voting on local issues, it's a short version.
I will be voting on local issues, definitely.
So when reform come to the area and they talk about immigration and so forth, is that a message, do you think, that's going to hit home?
It'll be really tricky. It'll be really interesting to see. Speaking for myself, I don't agree with what they talk about, but I can see that it does appeal to some people, and especially if the message is twisted to be they've taken your jobs. I mean, yeah, it just makes my blood boil. That kind of sentiment, but I can see that people will definitely be, as much as they are falling out of love with Labour, then it is a chance for the other part, well, Reform in particular, to pick up some of those voters.
Although there are still months before we will know who wins the race for Greater Lincolnshire Mayor, what is already becoming clear is the growing ambition of Reform UK. With genuine anger at the Labour government continuing to rise, could this be a statement victory for Nigel Farage's party, or will it be the first sign of a Tory resurgence?